One of the biggest mistakes that people make when they are getting into running is they just believe, and naturally you would think this, you do to a certain extent become more efficient at moving over the ground, so you become more effective at it, and therefore if you're more efficient and more effective at moving over the ground, naturally if you just run, it's going to be easier for you to get faster. But it's not the optimal way for you to gain speed and for you to get faster times and become faster as a runner. And then your overall, if you do become faster, if you do get that optimal way to becoming faster, then your overall running improves. Your recovery runs are slower and easier and help you become recovered quicker, so you can train harder, you can train faster when you need to. And as I've always said, the structure of a training plan, really, whether you're kind of training, dedicated training towards a race or an event, or you're trying to get fit, ready to do something, and ready to start a training plan, the structure is very simple. You're doing a fast session midweek and a weekend long run to build your endurance and stamina. But that faster stuff helps you in every part of your race. And every part of your training, and the way that you have to do that is you have to become comfortable at doing some form of interval training. So what is interval training? Very simply, interval training means that you're going to break whatever distance and whatever however many minutes you're going to run, you're going to break that up so it's more manageable for you to run it harder. So if you think about a 100-meter sprinter, they're not going to run in training every time 100 meters or 200 meters, 100 meters again. It's not going to work that way. They're not going to get faster at running 100 meters optimally just by running 100 meters over and over and over again. For sure, they will get faster if they're just getting into sprinting and they just continue to do that over and over. They will get faster. But it's not the fastest way to running optimal, as fast as they possibly can, in the shortest possible time training. That's not the fastest way to run 100 meters. They will break it down. So how are they in the blocks? How is the start? How is that transition into like full gear, into top gear? How is that middle part where they kind of like in full stride? And how is that dip? So there's different segments, even of the 100 meters, which, you know, the top guys are doing it in between 9 and 9.3, is it 9.4 and 10 seconds. Then there's so much that goes into 100 meters. Imagine what goes into distance running. And you may think it's a little bit more simple, but in terms of the interval training, for instance, if your goal is to run 20 minutes faster than you've ever ran it before, but break it up. So initially you could start with just minutes. So 20 times 1 minute with 60 seconds rest. Why as much rest? Why 60 seconds rest if you're only running for 60 seconds? Because you're then focusing on speed, so you're focusing on quality. So the more rest you give yourself, not to a point, like keep it to 60 seconds. I would try to keep it always to 60 seconds, whether I'm doing 10-minute reps or 1-minute reps, because I don't want my heart rate to drop too low. I don't want it to drop towards a level where I'm almost sedentary, I'm almost sat down. I want it to keep to a point just under 130 beats, so just into zone 1 for me, so that it's easier for me to push the next interval into a heart rate zone that I'm focusing on during that session. And that gets quite scientific and quite, not necessarily overly complicated or complex, but no need to go into that initially. The point is that you're breaking 20 minutes of hard running into 20 times 1 minute, so you can really push it. And then what you're gonna get is you're gonna get a sense that you can run faster because you're only doing 1 minute at a time, but you're also going to learn to pace 20 times 1 minute, and that's actually a really hard session. So an elite runner will do, one of the hardest sessions elite runners will do is 20 times 400 meters, which is about 20 times 1 minute on the track. And 400 meters is a difficult distance to get right, because it's kind of not a sprint, but it's not a distance run. It's sort of in between, and you know, a 400 meter runner, to get that right over and over again has got quite a difficult job, and you'll feel the lactic, not necessarily when you're doing 20 times 1 minute, but you'll feel it in a 400 meter race. You'll feel the lactic acid building up in that final corner, or hopefully not too soon with 150 meters to go, but definitely within that last 100 meters. So once you start to pace yourself, and once you start to be able to go quicker, what you're going to then find is that crosses over into your long running. And your interval session midweek will make your long runs naturally faster, but for the effort level that you should be running them at, which is in zone 2, which is comfortable. You can, quite comfortably hold some form of a conversation, a short form conversation with a running partner. It's not too difficult, and everything's easier if you're wearing a watch and you're monitoring your heart rate, which you can pick up a heart rate monitor watch now for less than $100. So it's probably the most useful training tool that you can get. And then you can plug it in and you can analyze your performance, and then you can see how fast you're going and analyze how that matches 4 weeks ago and 6 weeks ago, and what you're doing right, do more of that, and what you're doing wrong, do less of that. And analyzing your performance and thinking about what you're actually doing is part of progress, is part of improvement. So the progressions on from 20 times 1 minute are quite simple. It's not difficult to kind of like to make that yourself. You may do something like 15 times. So if you think about the overall time that you're working hard, that initial session 20 times 1 minute was 20 minutes. So you might try to break that 20 minutes up, or just add 10%, 22 minutes, or maybe 20%, 24 minutes. And make that into a session that is a little bit more. So you're running for 1 minute and 30, or you're running at 2 minutes at a time. And you'll find, for instance, that 20 times 1 minute is easier than 10 times 2 minutes. Or you might find that because there's less of them, and you slow down a little bit naturally if you're running for 2 minutes rather than 1 minute, because it's double the time, you might find that it's easier for you, psychologically it's easier to do 10 times 2 minutes than 20 times 1 minute. But there's two different benefits from those. You're still doing your speed work, you're naturally doing longer intervals, so there's more speed endurance, and you probably, with 10 times 2 minutes, you're probably going to be in the right zone that you want to push up that lactic threshold level, which again, it's overcomplicated unnecessarily, but essentially what you're doing is pushing up the level that you go into the red, so that you can no longer clear lactate faster than it's being accumulated in the body. So you want to kind of push up that level, and for a new runner that might be quite a low level, because you're not used to running speed endurance, you're not used to running not all out sprinting, but you're not used to going fast for long periods of time. And that's essentially what you're trying to do. You're improving your speed endurance. So once you fix that, and once you realize that if you just factor in a little bit of speed, and it might only be 20 minutes to begin with, and then you start to enjoy it, which is a different form of running. It's not just going out with a group for 40 minutes, or with a group for an hour, or with your pal for an hour, and doing an easy run where you're both talking and you don't really know what's going on, and by the end of it you've done 10, 12k or whatever it is, or 8k, and then you're looking at kind of like, you don't know what you're looking at, because it's kind of just an enjoyable recovery run, and the purpose is hit it, you feel better afterwards than when you start. When you're doing speed run, it's important for you to try to get the best out of that session, because that's where you're going to get your super compensation. That's where you're going to make the biggest leap forwards in your training. So very important to do. I'd say it's the most important part of my week. I train, if I'm training for an uphill race, for instance, I will train specifically on a gradient when I do that session. It's all to do with effort. So it doesn't matter how fast you're running. It matters what effort you're putting in, and the best way to do those sessions, and the best way to get most out of them, is to go, and you might want to sort of get into running first, and get into speed running, and then start to kind of put structure in your training, where you've got that midweek interval session, and then you've got a weekend long run, which is ever increasing to a point and then you're starting to factor in maybe in that weekend long run a few sections where you're going at marathon pace or at race pace that you're trying to intend to do, or race pace like slower at 10% or faster at 10% than race pace, and then get to a point where you're like, right, okay, I'm fit and I want to get checked out in the lab to find out what my lactate threshold zones are. And then once you get to that stage, then you can literally get the sessions that you need to do, the paces and the efforts that you need to do, and everything's correlated to heart rate, so you don't need to constantly be monitoring the blood. But then you get so much more out of your sessions that once I started to do that, probably 6-7 years ago, it almost feels as if you're cheating, because you've got access to so much data that's going in your body that has just been feelings before, and now you know exactly what's happening. So now you know exactly why you're staying in zone 2 for the vast majority of the race, if there's no need to push up into zone 3. Because once you start to go into zone 3, then you start to accumulate lactic acid at a point where, yes, you can clear it, but that's not an that won't go on forever. You've got probably 3 hours in that zone, so you will start to deplete it. So then it kind of gets more scientific, and that's great if you can still mix that with the passion of being outside and the enjoyability of doing these sessions. But initially, that speed work will do great things for you.